I lay on a wide bed with a heavy blanket wrapped 4 times round me, listening to grandmother praying. She was kneeling, pressing one hand to her breast, and now and again she slowly crossed herself with the other. I could hear the frost crackling outside. Greenish moonbeams shone through the windows, covered with patterns of ice, lighting up her kind face and her large nose, kindling her dark eyes with phosphorescent fire. The silky shawl that covered her hair shone like forged steel. Her dark shifting dress flowed down from her shoulders and spread out over the floor. When she had finished her prayers, she began silently to undress, folded her dress with great care on the chest in the corner of the room, and approached the bed where I lay, pretending to be asleep. "I know you're awake," she said ever so quietly. "Stop pretending and let me have some of the blanket." Relishing the thought of what was to follow, I could not help smiling. Then she snapped, "How dare you play tricks on your poor old grandmother?" She took hold of the edge of the blanket and tugged it with such force that I was catapulted up into the air, turning over and over several times before I landed back on the soft feather mattress. She roared with laughter. "What's the matter, Turniphead? Swallowed a mosquito?" Sometimes, however, she prayed so long that I really went off to sleep and didn't hear her get into bed at all. She always prayed for such a long time after a full day of quarrels and aggravation. Her prayers made fascinating listening. Grandmother told God about everything that happened in the house, down to the last detail. Massive, just like a mountain, she would kneel down and start off very quickly and in an unintelligible whisper, and then deepened her voice to a loud grumble. As you know too well, God, everyone wants the best of things. Mikhail the elder should really stay in town, and he wouldn't like it if he had to go across the river, where everything's new and hasn't been tried out yet. I've no idea what will happen. Father has more love for Yakov. Do you think it's a good thing to love one child more than the others? He's an obstinate old man. Please, God, make him see reason." As she looked at the dim icon with her large, shining eyes, she instructed God. "Let him have a dream which will make him understand how to give himself to both his sons." She crossed herself, bowed down to the ground, banging her forehead against the floorboards. Then she stood upright again and said persuasively, "Why don't you let my Varvara smile once more? What has she done to annoy you? Has she sinned more than the others? Why should a young healthy woman lead such a wretched life? And don't forget Grigory. His eyes are getting worse all the time. If he goes blind, he'll have to go begging. He's worked himself to the bone for grandfather, and do you think he'd help him? Oh, God." For a long time she said nothing and let her head and her arms hang down submissively, just as if she'd fallen fast asleep, or been suddenly frozen. "What else?" she said, and suddenly remembering, wrinkled her face and said, "Save all believers. Forgive me, stupid fool that I am. You know that I don't sin on purpose, but only because I'm stupid." After a deep sigh, she said in a warm, contented voice, "Dear God, you know everything that goes on." I liked grandmother's God very much, as he was so near to her, and I often used to ask her, "Tell me about God." She had a particular way of talking about him. She would speak very softly with a strange drawl, and her eyes closed. She always sat down at first, then she would get up, sit down again, cover her bare head with a shawl, and carry on until I fell asleep. God sits on a hill on a diamond throne in a heavenly pasture, shaded by silver lime trees that flower the whole year round. In heaven there's no winter or autumn, and the flowers never fade, but go on blossoming the whole time, so the saints can enjoy them. And around God fly hundreds of angels, like snowflakes or swarming bees, and they fly down to earth as white doves and then back to heaven to tell God all about us. There's my angel and yours and grandfather's. Everybody has one. God treats us all equally. Say, for example, your angel reported back to God, "Alexei poked his tongue at grandfather." God would order, "Let the old man give him a flogging." And he treats everyone according to what they deserve, whether it's joy or suffering. All is perfect harmony in heaven, and the angels rejoice and flap their wings and sing, "Glory to you, God, glory." And he, dear, just smiles back at them, and she smiled herself as she shook her head. Have you seen all this? I haven't seen it, but I know all about it, she answered pensively. When she talked about God, heaven, or the angels, she grew smaller and more gentle. Her face regained its youth, and her moist eyes radiated a particularly warm light. I took the heavy locks of her hair in my hands and wound them round my neck. All ears, I would sit quite still as I listened to her endless stories that never once bored me. Man can't see God. If he did, he'd go blind. Only the saints can look him full in the face. I've seen angels too. You can only see them when your soul is pure. Once I was at early mass, and I saw two of them on the altar, like patches of mist, and you could see right through them. They were so shining bright, and their wings were like muslin lace, and reached down to the floor. They moved round the communion table and helped old Father Ilya when he lifted up his weak arms to pray. They supported them by the elbows. He was very old, blind as well, and was always poking his nose in everywhere. He died soon after. When I saw the angels, I nearly died from joy. My heart ached, and the tears flowed down my cheeks. Oh, it was so wonderful. Oh, dearest Lenka, everything in heaven's so wonderful, and on earth too. Is it wonderful where we are? Grandmother crossed herself and answered, Praise be Our Lady, everything is wonderful. This rather disturbed me. It was hard to admit that everything in that house was wonderful. It seemed to me that things were going from bad to worse. Once, as I was passing Uncle Mikhail's room, I saw Aunt Natalia dressed all in white, her hand pressed to her breast, throwing herself about, screaming, not very loud, but in a way that terrified me. God help me, take me away. This prayer of hers I could understand, just as I understood Gregory when he grumbled, In the end I shall go blind and have to go begging. Even that will be better than staying in this place. I wanted him to go blind as soon as possible. I would have asked to be his guide, and together we should have gone begging. I had already mentioned this to him. Laughing into his beard, he replied, All right then, we'll go off together. I'll tell them in the town that you are grandson of Vasily Kasherin, master dyer. It should be very amusing. Often I could see blue swellings under Aunt Natalia's empty eyes, and the puffed-out lips on her yellow face. I used to ask grandmother, Does Uncle beat her? Yes, but on the quiet, the swine. Grandfather was against it, so he does it secretly at night. He's a wicked devil, and she's like a piece of jelly. Then she would tell me, the enthusiasm creeping into her voice. All the same, beatings today don't compare with those we used to get. Now it's only a question of a clout on the ear or the teeth, or you get your hair pulled. But in my day we were tortured for hours. Once grandfather beat me from the first day of Easter right from early mass until the evening. He'd lash out, have a rest, and then start again, with leather straps or anything he could lay his hands on. What for? I can't remember. And then a second time he nearly beat me to death and made me fast for 5 days. I was lucky to get over that. I was numbed by this revelation. Grandmother was twice as big as grandfather, and I couldn't believe that he could overpower her. Was he really stronger than you? Not stronger, but older. Besides, he's a man. To see her wipe the dust from the icons and clean the chasables was both an interesting and a pleasant experience. The icons were very rich, with pearls, silver, colored stones along their edges. She would nimbly pick an icon up, smile at it, and say with a great feeling, What a lovely little face. Then she would cross herself and kiss the icon. It's all dusty and covered in soot. Ah, Holy Mother, light of my life. Look, Lenya, the writing's so fine and the figures so tiny, but everything stands out clearly. It's called the 12 Holy Days, and there in the middle is the saintly Fyodorovna. And this one's Don't Mourn Me in the Grave, Holy Virgin. Often it seems she played at icons like my crippled cousin Katerina played with her dolls, seriously and with deep emotion. Many times she claimed to see devils in large numbers, or one at a time. One night during Lent I was passing the Rudolph's house. Everything was bathed in moonlight. Suddenly in front of me I saw something black sitting astride the roof near the chimney. It was bending its horned head over the chimney and sniffing and snorting. So big and hairy it was, lashing away with its tail against the roof and scraping its feet over the tiles. I crossed myself and said, Christ will rise again and his enemies will be scattered. At this he gave a little squeak and somersaulted down from the roof into the yard. That got rid of him. The Rudolphs must have been cooking meat, and of course he caught wind of it and came to enjoy the smell. So pleased he was that it was Lent and they were eating meat. The thought of the devil rolling head over heels down from the roof made me burst out laughing. Grandmother laughed too and said, "They love getting up to mischief, like little children. I remember once I was doing the washing in the bath round midnight. Suddenly the oven door blew open and out they poured, smaller and smaller, red ones, green, black, just like cockroaches. I made for the door but couldn't reach it. I got stuck in the middle of thousands of devils. They filled the whole bathroom so tight that you couldn't move, crawling under my feet, tugging at me, and pressing up against me so I couldn't even cross myself. Just like kittens they were, all furry and soft and warm, but they stood on their hind legs the whole time. They whirled and strutted about, showing their little teeth like mice. Their tiny eyes were green, and their horns were just coming through and stuck out like small knobs. They had piglets' tails. Oh, good Lord! I fainted clean away, and when I came to, the candle had almost burnt out. The water in the tub had gone cold, and there was washing all over the floor. You devils, I thought, go back to hell. When I closed my eyes, I could see the dense stream of hairy creatures, all of different colors, come pouring out of the mouth of the stove and from the little pebbles around it, filling the bathroom, blowing on the candle, and cheekily sticking out their pinkish tongues. It was both funny and horrifying. Grandmother shook her head and said nothing for a moment. Then she made another passionate outburst. I've seen lost souls as well, at night time. In winter, when a storm was raging, I was crossing the ravine at Cove, where Yakov and Mikhail wanted to drown your father in one of the ice holes in the pond, remember? Well, I was going my way and was just slithering down the path to the bottom of the gully when I heard such a whistling and whooping. There in front of me was a troika of black horses bearing right down on me with a fat devil in a red nightcap, standing out like a piece of wood on the driving seat and driving them on with reins made from steel chains in his outstretched hands. There wasn't any path round the gully, and the troika, hidden in a cloud of snow, went straight over the pond. All the passengers were devils, and they whistled and shouted and waved their caps. I counted 7 troikas that flew past like fire engines. The horses were black as crows, and all of them were people who'd at one time been cursed by their parents. They provide good sport for devils, who ride them and drive them through the night to their different celebrations. It must have been a devil's wedding I saw. It was impossible not to believe Grandmother. She spoke so simply and convincingly. But best of all were the verses she recited about the Holy Virgin, about how the Holy Virgin walked through this world of suffering, how she pleaded with the robber princess, Galecheva, not to beat or rob the Russian people, about Alexei, the man of God, about Ivan, the warrior, her verses about the all-wise Vasilia, about the goat pope and the divine godson, and those terrifying legends about Martha and Majoris, about Baba Usta, the bandit leader, about Maria, the Egyptian sinner, about the sorrows of the bandit's mother, there was no end to her fairy tales, legends, and poetry. Quite fearless of people or grandfather or devils or any kind of evil spirit, she was absolutely terrified of cockroaches. Even when they were nowhere near her, she used to wake me up at night and whisper, "Alyosha, dear, there's a cockroach crawling over the floor. Kill it, for heaven's sake." Half asleep, I would light the candle and creep over the floor in search of the enemy. It usually took me a long time to find it, and often I didn't find anything. "I can't see it," I would say, but Grandmother, lying motionless, would answer, hardly audible from under the bedclothes, "Yes, there is. Please, please find it. I know it's there." And she was never wrong. I would always find a cockroach, somewhere not far from the bed. "Did you kill it? God be praised. Thank you." With a sigh of relief, she would throw the blanket from her head and smile.